When you move on to something, for example, like the remnant, okay, the remnant, people have to understand, first of all, the history behind that. The remnant is a breakaway, fittingly, breakaway group from the wanderer. It was begun after a dispute among the Matt family and the two people running the show now, Joseph Matt at the Wanderer and Michael Matt over at the Remnant. They're cousins. And they broke away, and the dispute was over how do we approach this disaster in the church, the modernism, the infection of modernism. There is a problem, a huge problem, a crisis, but you must remain in the church to deal with it. Period. You cannot go do the Martin Luther thing. You can't go off and do the old Catholics thing that the Dutch did. You have got to stay in the church about it. The Wanderer family, the Matts split, and they're whatever their tension is there, go and form the remnant. And the remnant becomes this kind of voice for people who say, well, I'm going to distance myself from the jurisdiction of the church.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt for the Remnant Forum. I really hate to do this. There's so many things going wrong in the world right now. The very last thing that I feel like doing, not only to myself, but to the viewers of this program, is bring up the latest list of calumnies that have been unleashed against the traditional Catholic movement, specifically the Remnant, the Society of St. Pius X, the Angelus, John Veneri's Catholic Family News, by our friend Michael Voris over at Church Militant TV. I have no idea why Michael Voris has done this, but I stress that before coming out publicly to say something about this latest event, we've approached Michael Voris over the past 6 or 7 months many times privately, himself personally by telephone, his underlings such as Terry Carroll, and have gotten nowhere. And we believe now it's time to say something publicly because, let's face it, he apparently is trying to redefine traditional Catholicism, and he is saying that the only legitimate voice of concern over what's happening to the church is, in fact, himself, his friend Mrs. Niles, and whoever else is hanging out over in Detroit at the studio. And so there's a revisionist history going on. One of the things that Michael's doing, I think, to his detriment is he's taking himself really, really seriously. Those of us who are involved in internet TV, which is what the Remnant is and which is what Church Militant TV is, are doing something that any 14-year-old with a webcam can take a crack at. It's not like we're being pursued by Fox News and CNN and CBS and everyone else for big-time TV. This is just another way of trying to get the old message out using the new medium. And so we're doing it. Michael Voris is doing it. And I think it's very important that people realize that. We're not superstars. We're not Fox News. We're just Catholic journalists trying to do our best. Michael Voris apparently sees the Remnant and the rest of the traditional Catholic counter-revolution, if you will, as something of a threat. We had been longtime friends. We had him to our conferences. He spoke at Eric Frankovich's Catholic Identity Conference, for example, in 2013. And sitting across from him as a fellow speaker was the editor of the Angelus, for heaven's sakes, Jim Vogel, our friend Jim Vogel. He knows where we stand. We've had him to our conferences. We've had him over in Italy for John Rao's event, the Roman Forum at Gardone, and he knows exactly where we stand. Now, for some reason, he's pretending like he doesn't know where we stand, and he's attacking us in a very vicious way. So what to do? I'm not sure. I'm going to bring Chris Ferrara in here in a moment, but I stress the fact that Michael has not hurt us personally. He's not hurt Remnant TV, for example. He's undermining himself. I have no idea why he's doing this. But let's face it, he just took himself out of the running. If this were a competition between Remnant TV and Church Militant TV, he no longer has any influence over our constituency because he's attacked the Angelus and Catholic Family News and the Remnant and all the rest of us. So this is not personal. I'm not upset or mad or angry or tit for tat with Michael Voris. But for the sake of those who are confused, I think we have to respond. Chris Ferrara, what do you think is going on with this man? What is his game?
I don't get it, Mike. I mean, he had me on his show, mic'd up, the very show in which he just attacked you the other night. He called me an awesome dude. We were friends. He was with us in Lake Garda for 2 weeks. I shared jokes with him. He understood exactly what our positions were, and as far as I could see, he was in complete or at least substantial agreement.
Yeah.
And the latest episode is, I'm sorry to say, nothing short of bizarre. By the time he finished attacking all of the different targets, there was nobody left but Mike Voris.
Yeah.
He attacked the secular press. He attacked the liberal Catholic press. He attacked the mainstream Catholic press. He attacked EWTN. There was nobody left but Mike Voris. After he attacked the remnant, who's left? I don't know what's going on in that warehouse in Detroit, which is set up as a simulated TV studio. It's sad, really. And it really doesn't merit a lot of serious commentary. But one thing is important, and I think you have something that bears on it historically, his claim that Mike Voris and his associates, including this Mrs. Niles, and by the way, I was on her show too, that they now represent the future of the traditional Catholic movement in the line of Dietrich von Hildebrand. I think you have a document of some historic importance that bears on that. Maybe you could read it for the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on our website right now. It's a letter from Dietrich von Hildebrand to my uncle. This is kind of personal, Chris. I mean, that's what I say. I really hesitate to get into it at all. I mean, he opened the wounds. The Wanderer and the Remnant are actually coming back together a little bit as things get progressively worse in the church under Pope Francis. He opened that wound. He tried to drive a wedge right in there between the two factions of the Matt family. He went after my father personally. He basically spit all over the memory of my father. Now, I have no intention of defending my father's noble and very good legacy or memory to a man like Michael Voris. But yeah, he's really, really hitting below the belt, Chris. And as you say, he claims that he's standing on the shoulders of Dietrich von Hildebrand. So I want to read this letter from Dietrich von Hildebrand from 1970, which is on our website, because it does address a larger issue of the Mass, the Council, and criticisms of the Holy Father publicly. Here's what Dietrich von Hildebrand was saying back then in 1970. Again, and this is a letter to my uncle. Dear Mr. Alphonse Matt, I thank you very much for your kind letter, but I believe that there is some misunderstanding. You assume that the New Order Missae, the Novus Ordo Mass, and especially the rubrics, constitute for me merely a personally painful change by replacing something very beautiful and perfect with something less beautiful and less perfect. But unfortunately, it is my conviction that the New Ordo Missae is the greatest pastoral mistake and that its consequences for the Church may be disastrous. And von Hildebrand continues, I agree, however, completely with you that it is a grave problem whether one should criticize it publicly or only intramuros. Concerning this problem, everyone must follow his conscience. But I frankly cannot understand that you do not only abstain from a public criticism of the New Order Missae, but make the Wanderer an instrument for propagating and praising the New Order of Mass. You even suggest in your letter, dear Mr. Matt, that I should join this propaganda. As you say that you agreed with my article in Triumph, in which I stress that obedience to practical decisions of the Pope does not imply approval of them. It is difficult for me to understand why you expect me to utter an equivocal approval of something which seems to be, from a purely religious point of view, a suicidal practical decision. And finally, von Hildebrand's last paragraph. I do not believe that a mere loyalty to the present Pope, who does not act against those who destroy the Catholic faith daily more and more, like Kung, Schillebeck, Greeley, and many others, and who does not use the means by which the Church survived through 2,000 years, anathema and excommunication, can preserve Catholic faith untarnished. Dear Mr. Matt, it is painful for me to disagree with you because of my sincere admiration for the Wanderer throughout the past years and our warm personal union in Christ. This disagreement, however, should in no way affect our friendly relations. Faithfully yours in Christ, Dietrich von Hildebrand. End quote. Now, Chris, one thing to note before I ask you to comment on that letter from von Hildebrand is the manner in which good Catholic, serious gentlemen disagreed with one another in the past, days long since past. But that's a beautifully written letter to a man, my uncle, who he obviously disagrees with. There was a disagreement at the time, but it was handled beautifully. But at the end of the day, when you look at that letter, obviously the remnant is the one standing on the shoulders of Dietrich von Hildebrand, not Mike Voris and Church Militant TV, as he claims, because Mike Voris has the exact opposite of von Hildebrand's position on criticism of the Pope.
Sure. I mean, von Hildebrand said in a nutshell what the basic problem was that gave rise to the traditionalist movement, a disastrous mistake of prudential judgment in the form of the new liturgy. We're not denying its essential validity, But what we're saying is that in its particulars, in the way it presents the Eucharistic sacrifice, it was bound to cause a disaster in terms of a loss of faith in the real presence. And with that, with this deterioration in the liturgical life of the Church, what Cardinal Ratzinger called a continuing process of decay. This prudential decision was disastrous. That isn't Michael Voris's position, at least not now. He seemed to agree with it when he was a friend of ours, but then inexplicably, almost overnight it seems, he was attacking us. In one of his screeds, he called us spiritual pornographers. I don't know what's going on in the warehouse in Detroit, but what I do see is a man surrounded by all kinds of fancy gadgets and some sort of staff, including some youngster with a bow tie who was acting as a commentator. And I see people who are essentially clueless about what the problem in the Church is today. The problem emanates from the top, from prudential decisions at the top. No one is indicting the Pope as a person. No one is judging his motives. We're simply looking at the consequences of what von Hildebrand noted way back in 1967 was bound to be a disastrous mistake of papal prudential judgment. What people like Mr. Voris don't seem to recognize is that you can't really discuss the crisis in the Church intelligently without examining the acts and omissions of the Roman pontiff. Mr. Voris spends day after day after day bashing the bishops for doing what the Pope not only has approved, but in some cases has mandated.
Yeah.
It is an approach that doesn't make any sense. But there's a more courageous approach. Let me quote you something that was just written in the form of an open letter by the Archbishop Emeritus of Kazakhstan, Jan Pavel Lenga. He talks about a crisis in the Church which we are now experiencing that really has no precedent in prior Church history. Let me quote from this letter. One can observe at all levels of the Church an obvious decrease of the sacrum. The spirit of the world feeds the shepherds. The sinners give the Church instructions for how she has to serve them. In their embarrassment, the pastors are silent on the current problems and abandon the sheep while they are feeding themselves. In our days, the voice of the majority of the bishops resembles the silence of the lambs in the face of furious wolves.
Wow.
The faithful are left like defenseless sheep. But he doesn't stop at just pointing out the problem with the bishops. He goes so far as to quote, and this is an archbishop elevated to that status by John Paul II. He quotes the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, the Masonic blueprint for the infiltration of the Church, which both Pius IX and Leo XIII wanted to be published widely because they recognized it as an authentic and seriously important historic document. He quotes this instruction. An archbishop, again, elevated to his position by John Paul II. And here's what he quotes. Our work is a work of 100 years, say these Masons about their plans. Let us leave the elder people and let us go to the youth. The seminarians will become priests with our liberal ideas. We shall not flatter ourselves with false hopes. We will not make the Pope a Freemason. However, liberal bishops who will work in the entourage of the Pope will propose to him in the task of governing the Church such thoughts and ideas which are advantageous for us, and the Pope will implement them into life. End quote. Now, the Archbishop goes on to say this, again, elevated to his status by John Paul II. I quote the Archbishop. This intention of the Freemasons is being implemented more and more openly, not only thanks to the declared enemies of the Church, but with the connivance of false witnesses who occupy some high hierarchical office in the Church. It is not without reason that Blessed Paul VI said, the spirit of Satan penetrated through a crack inside the Church.
Wow.
He's talking about the Vatican.
Right.
He's talking about the Pope, whatever his intentions may be, allowing himself to be instrumentalized for the auto-demolition of the Church.
Unbelievable.
That's where the problem begins, and that's where the solution to this crisis will begin.
Chris,
And Mr. Voris simply refuses to see this.
he refuses to see it, Chris, and I really don't understand why that isn't a failure to follow the dictates of Christian charity. I mean, even take somebody like Cardinal Dolan. We've had conversations with Cardinal Dolan. We've seen him addressing conservative groups, for example, Catholic groups, and nothing but orthodoxy comes out of his mouth. The man does have an orthodox core. But what really seems to be throwing a man even like Cardinal Dolan, who's embarrassed us all over the past year, what's throwing him into a cocked hat and making a buffoon of him is his desire to follow Pope Francis. It's clear as can be. Everything he's doing is following what his boss wants. So I don't understand by what twisted logic it's okay for us to condemn the men who are listening and obeying the superior. Why are we doing this? Why are we condemning the underlings for simply obeying the superior and pretending as though the superior doesn't want this to happen? We know this is what they want, and it seems to me to be grossly uncharitable.
Of course, I watched a bit of the episode. Frankly, I don't take the show that seriously. I wasn't going to sit through a whole hour of that nonsense.
Yeah.
It's somebody playing with toys in a warehouse in Detroit. Let's be serious here.
Yeah.
But I did watch part of it, and in part of the show, I think it was Mrs. Niles. Again, I was on her show, for whatever that's worth, is pointing out that the remnant, according to her, engages in mockery of the Supreme Pontiff. There's no mockery of the Supreme Pontiff on the pages of the remnant. What we're talking about on the pages of the remnant are the explosive words and deeds of the Pope and all their implications. We analyze what he says and does. We don't mock him and we don't condemn him. On the other hand, Mr. Voris is apparently making his bones by mocking and condemning the bishops.
Yeah.
The things he says about these bishops are unbelievable. That they're condemned to hell, that they're evil serpents. The epithets go on forever. We've never said anything like that concerning Francis.
Yeah.
The worst we've done is make some ironic comments.
Yeah.
Nothing approaching the level of invective that he spews out toward the bishops every day.
Yeah.
The bishops are obviously a huge part of the problem, but they're not the ultimate source of the problem.
Yeah.
The source of the problem is what has been happening at the top of the church since the opening to the world, inaugurated by the Pope himself at the Second Vatican Council. And Mr. Voris doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't want to
exactly. He doesn't want to get it. That's what I'm concerned about. I mean, he brought out his producer the other night to tell us all why I'm in schism and you're in schism, and why the Society of St. Pius X is in schism, which, of course, is a mortal sin. This is not a light charge. And at the same time that they're driving this wedge and polarizing the good folks, the folks in the society and outside the society, by making this charge of schism, Bishop Athanasius Schneider is meeting with Bishop Bernard Fillet at the seminary down in Winona, Minnesota, just a few hours from where I am right now. And they're discussing all of these things. A really good and important meeting is taking place, in other words. And there's Voris just throwing a monkey wrench into the whole thing by coming out and blasting away against the Society of St. Pius X, as though there's no legitimate debate going on. Now, Chris, you and I both have friends and family who don't think the Society of St. Pius X is the answer, and they're worried about the canonical status and all of that. The Society itself is worried about the canonical status. But for Michael Voris to pretend like there aren't very strong arguments on both sides of that divide, and instead just pontificate like the little pope that he apparently thinks he is, that they are all in schism and outside the church, in the midst of the present crisis, that, Chris, is a scandal.
Well, a word of advice to Mr. Voris. We were once friends. I counted you as a friend. You turned around literally within the space of a day or two, as far as I can tell, and denounced me as a spiritual pornographer. I don't know what's driving you, but I would suggest this to you, Mr. Voris. Put away the toys and the gadgets. Take some time away from your warehouse in Detroit and learn about the issues that you're talking about. His lack of canonical sophistication on this question is embarrassing.
Yeah.
First of all, even if you were to argue that there is schism at work in some aspect of the life of the Society of St. Pius X, you would be talking about the four bishops. Not even the Vatican has ever said that the lay adherents of the Society are in a state of schism. The excommunications of the bishops were lifted. If a bishop is not excommunicated, and if the priests of the Society are not excommunicated, by canonical definition, they're eligible to receive the sacraments of the Catholic Church. People who are eligible to walk into a parish, as they are, and receive the sacraments of the Church cannot really be in schism. That's why you've had conflicting reports from Vatican dicasteries. That's why you've had heads of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith saying one thing and then another. The issue is far from clear. I don't believe that they're in schism. It's ludicrous to speak of a schism Well, not even the Orthodox schismatics are called schismatic anymore.
Right.
So Mr. Voris lacks, with all due respect, the sophistication in this issue, the knowledge of this issue, the ability to make distinctions that is crucial to understanding this issue. And for him to get on the air, or I should say, for him to get on his little YouTube channel and essentially write 1 million Catholics out of the church with the concurrence of Mrs. Niles is ludicrous.
Yeah, and Mrs. Niles makes a point. She actually anticipates what she knows to be the argument. She brings up Cardinal Hoyos, for heaven's sakes, the former head of the CDF in the Vatican. Why does she bring him up? Because she knows that's a strong argument. I was standing in front of Cardinal Hoyos in Nebraska for the Fraternity of St. Peter ordinations a few years ago at a press conference, which is recorded, audio and video. And I said to him, I said, Your Eminence, I'm a Catholic journalist. I want to know what the correct term is to use with respect to the Society of St. Pius X. Do I call them a schismatic group? Are they in schism? And Chris, I mean, everybody saw this at the time. Cardinal Hoyos' response was, no, that is not the correct word. They are not in schism. They have an irregular canonical status, which we are working to resolve. Now, Chris, that was the top dog. He was the cardinal in charge of reunification of the society with the Vatican. That was his opinion. That's what he said at the time. So when you have a disagreement over this issue at the highest echelons of the church, to just take one side, just cherry pick, especially when you look at the fruits of the Society of St. Pius X, hundreds and hundreds of priests, vocations, more vocations than they can fit in their own seminary, these large families and so many wonderful and beautiful things that are happening. People are keeping the faith. When you look at the fruits of them and you just cast them all aside, Chris, it's as if the folks at Church Militant TV seem to want the society to be in schism. I don't know why, but it's peculiar.
The society for too long has been used as the bugaboo by Catholics who are not really of the traditionalist movement, don't understand what the movement is all about, and fail to appreciate the accuracy of its predictions about what was going to happen in the church, as we saw with the letter you read from Dietrich von Hildebrand back in 1967. These people need a bugaboo because the traditionalist movement is being vindicated. And so we find that the society is being dredged up as the bugaboo. Oh, they're schismatics. They're not schismatics in any accepted general traditional sense of the word. Back in the 1990s, before the excommunications had even been lifted, Cardinal Cassidy rejected the idea that the approach to the society is an ecumenical approach because he said this is an internal problem of the Catholic Church. If the society represents an internal problem, then the idea of a schism is ipso facto excluded. Now, the people at Church Militant would know this if they had done any reading on the subject. They would know this is a complex canonical question. But you know what? That's really a distraction. Put aside the issue of the Society of St. Pius X. The real problem is the problem that they are failing to confront at places like Church Militant TV. It isn't a bunch of bishops that they bash day in and day out that are the problem. They are the symptoms of an underlying ecclesiastical crisis, an ecclesial disease that began at the top and is only going to be cured at the top. Right now we're looking at a situation where we have a synod on the family, and Mr. Voris was quite vocal about bashing the synod when he was over in Rome, but the synod on the family was conceived, convoked, and controlled by the Pope. This is his baby. The theme of the Synod was established by the Pope through the so-called Theology of Mercy of Cardinal Casper. That theme is the Pope's theme. He's made it quite clear. Cardinal Baldessari has revealed what we already knew. The midterm report with its call for an opening to the gays and the divorced and remarried and people who are cohabiting, essentially a compromise on everything in the area of marriage and sexuality. That report was approved by Pope Francis, who authorized its publication before the Synod Fathers, the bishops that Voris bashes, had even seen it. What does he do with this information? He hides it. That's not an intelligent and honest discussion of the crisis in the church. That's just an evasion. If he wants to evade that truth, that's fine. But really, to use his little TV station as a launching pad to attack your publication, it deserves the use of social communications. I don't know what he thinks he's accomplishing. He's certainly not gaining new subscribers. The comments I've seen in the various com boxes indicate that every time he does this, he hemorrhages more subscribers.
No, I think, Chris, for for him not to acknowledge the reality of the situation. I mean, we're all aware of the fact that Bishop Bernard Follet of the Society of St. Pius X has taken some heat from his own organization, from his own society, not a lot, but some, for his insistence on trying to do whatever he possibly can to keep the doors of communication open, the channels of communication open with the Vatican. This is not a schismatic act, Chris. It's not a schismatic behavior. Throughout the whole world, every single Society of St. Pius X priest, when he says his Mass every day, not only does he pray in the Mass for Pope Francis, but he prays for the local ordinary, for heaven's sakes, for the local bishop. This is not the attitude of a schismatic organization. And so for Michael Voris to not even bring up the fact that Bishop Follet is under some, criticism for being too soft on the Vatican and so forth. Why? Because he's a loyal son of the church who's looking for the opportunity to go in and help the church, not just go off in a ghetto and hide out and have no care for what's happening to the larger body of the church. Why wouldn't Michael Voris bring this up? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, obviously, this is not your typical schism, even if it were a schism. It isn't, but it certainly isn't typical. It's worth a conversation.
It's what Cardinal Cassidy said back in the 1970s. It's an internal problem of the church. But, moving beyond this boogaboo of the Society of St. Pius X, moving beyond Church Militant TV and their latest outburst, the real schism that confronts us today is the de facto schism, even if it isn't canonically existent, on the part of legions of faithful.
Yeah, that's
John Paul II referred to silent apostasy in the church.
That's it.
Silent apostasy. An apostate, by definition, has broken communion. And yet, they're sitting in church buildings as they contracept, as they divorce and remarry and continue to receive Holy Communion, as they ignore the church's teaching on contraception, abortion, marriage and procreation, as they vote in polls in favor of the ordination of women as priests, as they basically adopt the views of liberal Protestants. They sit in the pews. The church in Germany is effectively in a state of schism already.
Yeah.
They're openly calling for defiance of the church's bimillennial discipline on the admission of the divorced and remarried to Holy Communion, even if the Synod doesn't ultimately approve it. They're going to do it anyway. There are millions and millions of souls who have simply abandoned the faith wherever it displeases them. And yet we have this continuing obsession with 4 traditional bishops and the adherents of the Society of St. Pius X who subscribe to every dogma and doctrine of the faith. It's pathological.
Yeah, there's a certain church lady approach that goes on to the society all too often. I mean, come on, we're big people here. We're big kids. We can discuss this. I mean, the idea, the church's laws regarding schism, this has to do with those who are trying to break with union with Rome in order to go off and do their own thing, to sort of drift away from the faith. The Society of St. Pius X has made a concerted effort over the past 40 years to stay in the church, to stay true to the teachings of the church. And this puts them at odds with the Vatican. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So when it comes to this idea of the church's laws on schism, what we're doing is we're really sticking with that letter of the law, but completely ignoring the spirit of the law, which is to save and preserve the souls and preserve the faith in the community. And that's exactly what the society is trying to do. So I think, again, to overlook that and to take your little pocket protector, legalistic approach to this is real strange, especially given all the extenuating circumstances regarding this quote-unquote schism of the Society of St. Pius X. It's weird. It's strange.
Well, but they're not really taking a legalistic approach. They're not really applying the canons properly. They're taking an emotionalist approach. Ooh, they're evil. They're in schism. Meanwhile, the mass apostasy of the faithful is overlooked, or you bash the bishops while the Pope does nothing about the mass apostasy. And in fact, would appear to be encouraging it with this crazy synod.
Yeah.
And now they're gearing up for their big breakthrough in 2015. Look, I mean, I see we're running out of time, and I don't want to pay too much more attention to Mr. Voris and his TV show, but I would say he has some considerable talents as a commentator, broadcaster type of personality. He should really inform himself better about these issues and stop trying to make his reputation by tearing down basically everybody, as we saw in the last episode, everybody in the church, but Mr. Voris and his staff in Detroit.
Yeah.
He really should just knock it off.
Yeah.
And you apply his resources and his talents to what we thought we had before, which was an alliance with the full-fledged traditionalist movement, even if he can't bring himself to become a part of it.
No, that's it, Chris. I mean, you're right. Well, it is. It's disheartening. I'd like to say that it's not, but it is, and it's not disheartening for me personally. I think what it does, it's just another sucker punch to the folks, to the regular people who are just trying. They're hanging on by their fingernails, trying to keep things together here as the church undergoes this passion. And so, not dissimilar from what happened with Father Karapi and, some of the different priests I'm not going to name, who were, sort of high-profile priests, and people were so happy to have a priest they could turn to and see the face of Christ. And then there's these huge scandals. And now in the traditional movement, we're serving up another one. And it's so regrettable, Chris. This is the worst part of this whole thing, that we have to deal with this, and more importantly, that we have to put so many people through it and scandalize them again and discourage them again. I mean, I wish there was some way to avoid it, but I don't know. The devil just seems to be hard at work.
Well, the problem is you give somebody a camera and access to the internet, and he does what he will, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I don't take it seriously, and I don't think anybody else should. And I would just implore Mr. Voris to become a little more educated about these issues. Learn through reading some of the serious traditionalist literature, and there's a pile of it you apparently haven't even looked at, before you start commenting on these questions again. I mean, the business with him thinking that he follows in the line of von Hildebrand is a huge embarrassment. He obviously hasn't the slightest idea what Dietrich von Hildebrand and the traditionalist movement really stand for. He's reducing everything to the Society of St. Pius X, the 4 bishops and their lay adherents. The traditionalist movement is much bigger than that, is a much longer duration, and he just doesn't have the grasp of the issues that is required to take public positions on it. I'm sorry. It's just not there.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, all right. Well, that'll be the last word, Chris, on that. I don't know. Hopefully it's the last word, period. I don't know if he's going to continue to serve up these crazy broadsides. If he does, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to bother answering it too much more after this. We're just going to forge ahead with regret, and hopefully at some point, Michael Voris will turn around and come back and try to circle the wagons with us and defend the church. If he doesn't, he doesn't. We just keep moving on. So
yeah, I mean, as one of my sons would say, it's sad, really.
It's sad, really. All right, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much, and have a great weekend.
Okay, Mike. Thanks.
See you.
Bye-bye.